Have you ever wondered if there's a perfect way for a society to make a decision? A way that's fair, rational, and reflects the will of the people? It seems simple enough, but one of the greatest economists of the 20th century, Kenneth J, proved that it's mathematically impossible, and that was just the beginning of his revolutionary work. Kenneth J wasn't just an economist, he was a master architect of modern economic thought. His ideas are so foundational that if you've ever studied economics, finance, or even political science, you've walked through a house that J helped build. Today, we're going to explore the pillars of his work and understand why his insights are more relevant than ever. Let's start with the big one: competitive markets. Before J, economists had a strong intuition that free markets, where buyers and sellers compete, lead to an efficient outcome where no one can be made better off without making someone else worse off. This is the famous invisible hand concept. But it was just that, a concept. Working with Gérard de Breu, J provided the rigorous mathematical proof. They built a model, known as the de Breu model, which showed that under specific ideal conditions, a competitive market equilibrium does exist and is efficient. This was a monumental achievement. It gave the theory of free markets a solid, logical foundation, moving it from intuition to a proven theorem. It became the bedrock of what we call general equilibrium theory. However, J was a realist. He knew the world wasn't a perfect mathematical model. His own work opened up a can of worms. For instance, while an equilibrium might exist, is it unique? Is it stable? If prices get knocked off balance, will they naturally return to equilibrium? Later research, known as the Sonnenschein-Mantel-Debreu theorem, delivered a shocking answer. Not necessarily. It turns out that the collective behavior of a market doesn't have to be neat and tidy. Aggregate demand can twist and turn in almost any way imaginable. This means we can't just assume a market will find its footing on its own. It was J and his colleagues who first began to seriously explore these stability problems, clarifying both the power and the profound limits of the competitive market model as a predictive tool. Now, let's get back to that bombshell I mentioned at the start, the impossibility of a perfect voting system. This comes from J's most famous work, Social Choice and Individual Values. Think about it. In a democracy, we try to combine everyone's individual preferences, who you want for president, what policy you support, into a single collective social choice. J laid out a few simple, common-sense conditions for a fair voting system. Things like, if everyone prefers option A over option B, then the group's final choice should also rank A over B. And no single person, a dictator, should be able to impose their will on everyone else. The list of conditions is surprisingly minimal and seems totally reasonable. But here's the kicker. J proved, with cold, hard logic, that no voting system can satisfy all of these basic fairness conditions at the same time. Unless you make one person a dictator. This is J's impossibility theorem. The message isn't that democracy is doomed. Instead, it was a wake-up call. It forced us to be honest about the trade-offs we make when we design voting systems or try to aggregate public opinion. It shows that in any collective decision-making process, some ideal of fairness or rationality has to give way. It completely reframed how political scientists and economists think about collective action, forcing clarity on the hidden assumptions behind every system we use to make group decisions. But J's curiosity didn't stop there. He turned his powerful intellect to one of the most fundamental forces in our lives: uncertainty. How do we make decisions when we don't know what the future holds? J, along with John Pratt, developed the standard measures for risk aversion that are still used in every finance class today. This gave us a language to talk about how much risk people are willing to take. More importantly, he showed how markets could help us deal with uncertainty. He introduced the idea of contingent securities. Think of them as insurance contracts for any possible future event. If you could buy and sell these securities for every possible state of the world, you could perfectly share risk. In such a complete market, the allocation of resources would remain efficient even in the face of uncertainty. Of course, he knew that in reality, markets are far from complete. We can't buy insurance against every little thing that could go wrong. This gap between the ideal world and our real world, with its information gaps and transaction costs, became a massive field of study, all thanks to his initial framework. Arrow also had a profound insight into what truly drives economic growth: knowledge. In a classic paper, he argued that knowledge is a special kind of good, what economists call a public good. Once an idea is out there, anyone can use it, and one person's use doesn't prevent another's. This is great for humanity, but it's a problem for private markets. Why would a company spend millions on research if its competitors can just copy the results for free? Arrow showed that without things like patents, prizes, or government funding, the private market will always underinvest in innovation. This paper laid the groundwork for modern debates on innovation policy. He didn't stop there. He also introduced the concept of learning by doing. The more you produce something, the better you get at it. Production itself creates knowledge and boosts productivity. This simple but powerful idea became a bridge to modern theories of endogenous growth, which explain how technological progress and human capital drive long-term economic prosperity from within the system. Perhaps one of Arrow's most human-centric analyses was on medical care. He asked, why doesn't the healthcare market look like the market for cars or bananas? His 1963 paper on the topic is a masterclass in applying economic reasoning to a complex social institution. He identified the core features that make healthcare unique. First, there's radical uncertainty. You don't know when you'll get sick or what it will entail. Second, there's a huge information asymmetry. Your doctor knows a lot more than you do. This makes trust and professional ethics absolutely central. Because of these factors, the normal market mechanisms run into trouble. Insurance markets face problems of adverse selection and moral hazard. For-profit models can clash with the need for trust. Arrow showed that the structures we see in healthcare, non-profit hospitals, professional licensing, government regulation, aren't just weird quirks. They are institutional responses to the fundamental nature of health and illness. His analysis became the essential starting point for every major debate about healthcare reform, providing a framework for balancing market incentives with the critical goals of equity and trust. Finally, Arrow's work had a huge impact on how governments make decisions, especially about big risky projects like building a dam or investing in new green technology. With his colleagues, he developed what's known as the Arrow-Lind theorem. The core idea is that when a government undertakes a risky project, the risk is spread across the entire population of taxpayers. For any one individual, the additional risk is tiny, almost negligible. Therefore, he argued, the government should evaluate the project based on its expected return, without adding a hefty discount for risk, which a private company would have to do. This principle fundamentally shaped cost-benefit analysis, the tool governments use to decide if a public project is worth the cost. While critics point out the strong assumptions required, it remains a cornerstone of public investment theory. So, what's the common thread weaving through all of Kenneth Arrow's work? It's a philosophy of intellectual honesty. He would start with clear, simple assumptions, build a logical and elegant model, and derive powerful conclusions. But then, he would immediately turn a critical eye on his own work, relentlessly exposing the gap between the pristine world of his theorems and the messy, complicated reality of human institutions. His goal was never to just build abstract theories. It was to use the clarity of those theories to understand the world better, and then to figure out how we could design better systems, better policies, and better organizations. From proving the limits of markets to revealing the paradoxes of democracy, Kenneth Arrow gave us the tools not to find perfect answers, but to ask the right questions. And in a world filled with complex challenges, that is perhaps the most valuable gift of all. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's greatest economic minds, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. We'd love to have you with us. See you in the next one.